Do you want to become a Netflix animation director? What if you don't live in LA? Or maybe not even in America? Can you still make it? Today, you'll learn all about it from Simone Giampaolo, an animator who's worked with Blue Zoo, Arman, Google, Cartoon Network, Disney, and has directed an amazing animated show on Netflix. In this video, you'll discover how to pitch your ideas, the secrets behind writing for both a preschool and adult audience, and producing award-winning short films. And stick around until the end because Simone reveals the one animation step you should never skip. This video is packed with practical advice you can start using right away. Welcome to Write for Animation. I'm so happy to get to talk with you. We're almost neighbors, right?
Thank you, Pietro. Yeah, we are basically neighbors. We come from the same region in Italy. Wow. I'm so happy you found me, even though we've never met before in real life near our place where we were born.
And you also left your country and you're now in London, right?
Yes, I come from the border between Switzerland and Italy, from a small town called Chiasso between Milan and Lugano. I left around 13 years ago to study in the UK. After that, I found my first job in London and I stayed. So it's been over 10 years now that I'm in the UK, in London working.
It's so impressive to see so many credits, so many experiences from Google, Warner Bros., Cartoon Network, Disney, Nickelodeon, Lego. Your series now on Netflix, and you're already working on with a new studio. And give us an idea of how that journey has been for you.
Yes, so I joined the industry really as a junior. I had never worked or done animation before I started studying it. I only did scribbled as a hobby. I love drawing, illustrating stories, writing stories, but I never used a computer for doing animation. So I forced myself to learn 3D. I forced myself to learn English better because my English was pretty bad around 13 years ago. Imagine, even worse than it is now. But my accent isn't leaving me even after 13 years, but at least I improved in the grammar. And yeah, I really started as a junior animator at a studio in central London called Blue Zoo. So I moved my first step in the commercial department doing animation, also trying some other things like modeling, a bit of compositing. So I became a bit of a generalist at Blue Zoo in this commercial department, mostly focusing on animation. And slowly I managed to move my steps up the ladder by always pitching ideas, original ideas for shorts. So ideas for shorts have always been the trigger which has propelled my career forward. Like I pitched an idea that got made in Blue Zoo and that gave me the confidence, but also the credibility to pitch something else or to approach another studio or to pitch for a TV series or to get hired for a TV series director position. So it's always been about personal ideas, really. And I'm working on my first feature film idea now, but I've never really written a feature film. But short films ideas have always propelled my career forward. So that's something I would suggest and encourage for people who want to be directors. Always be ready to develop short films ideas for any kind of budget, for free or for a limited budget, depending on your possibilities. That would be my big advice.
I'm looking at the posters behind you, Star Wars. Many young directors and writers, they have this big saga idea and like this huge project close to their heart. And I believe that it can become the next big thing. At the same time, it's really hard to be able to run before you learn to walk. And the short film is a much better way to start out and to start to train about how one driven by a good narrative is a mini feature film.
Before you can get to that, you have to learn how to handle 4, 5, 10 minutes story. Once you can handle and once you can master 10 minutes story, then it becomes so much easier and so much more effective for you to work on a longer format. I talk to students very often. I do master classes or talks at university, and I see how ambitious some people are. And being ambitious is good. I really appreciate that and respect that. But you have to be realistic that moving into a 90-minute story as your first attempt to direct is wild, is very wild. I really recommend sometimes to get a fun or a meaningful idea going for between 3 minutes and 10 minutes, especially to students. make sure that works, nail that, and that will give you much more credibility in the future when you're pitching for bigger stuff. And let's be honest, even George Lucas, he started with short films. You have
Absolutely.
you have to make your own steps. You cannot just jump these steps on the ladder, right?
Yeah, and also I think that what brings you is the possibility of exposure. Let's say somebody approaches you at a festival and they say, I have this 2-minute short film. I bet that your reaction, if you have time, let's watch it on your iPad, compared to this huge script or treatment that nobody will read. A finished product is something that is unique. And I wanted to ask you about starting with the basics in terms of what's something that can help people understand what is the role of an animation director, also compared to live action.
There are two different roles. It's always a bit misleading, or it's easy to confuse the two. There is usually on big production, especially in CGI, there is the animation director and then there is the director of the animated films. And I've been animation director for quite some time. Animation director is the one supervisor who takes care only of animation team. And then there is the director of animated films, or just director, who takes care of all of the departments. So in the past years has been interesting because my role in the industry has moved from animation director. I've been animation director on several Blue Zoo, Jellyfish Pictures, Aardman products and content. I moved that to director. And that means also supervising pre-production, design, lighting, compositing, sound. So it's a much broader kind of role. You don't have to know everything or be an expert in everything, but you have to have a wide range of skills, or at least understand about those roles. So that's just to clarify the difference. Yeah, there is animation director and then director. In terms of your question regarding the difference, I just think the director in an animated film has got to do so much more work up front. Everything needs to be defined because every minute costs so much in animation. So working very heavily on story, working very heavily on storyboard, closely with the math team and the editing team. So everything has to be done, research, and everything has to be done up front. Whereas in live action, you have the luxury sometimes to film more or record more, and then you can combine stuff in editing. And I would love to try that one day. I would like to try live action and to see the experience, to feel the experience of feeling a bit more freer behind the cameras. Like, we go and do a shooting and let's see what comes up, because that's impossible in animation. You cannot just freely decide to add a scene if there is no time or budget to do it. And that budget is decided up front. So it's always, of course, there is a margin of changes you can do in post-production or right at the end of the line, but they're minimal compared to what you can do in live action, where you can try new things. So I think that's the biggest difference. Like the amount of work and concentration you have to up front rather than later.
We have a community called the Right for Animation Academy, and some of the members shared their questions. And this is from Darshan, and he asks, what is the difference between writing for preschool and adult audiences?
That's a very good question. I don't believe you're right for kids, to be honest. Like, I'll be honest with you, it's most of the gags and most of the jokes you will see in Bad Dinosaurs, the series on Netflix that you're talking about, they are not written. They just come up spontaneously while planning the action with the storyboard team, animatic, editing, and animators. So it's like having the puppets. You can do that in stop motion if you have the actual puppets, but you can do also in CG with these three-dimensional puppets. You have the puppets, you go back 30, 40 years in time, you think how you played with dinosaur while you were a child, and what kind of combination of movements you can do, and what kind of gags you can create with the shapes that nature gave you, and you come up with the gags and joke. For me, when it comes to physical, snappy and slapstick comedy, it's not really about writing, but it's more about sketching and drawing. A show which hasn't got much dialogue, at all, because characters only say roar or arr, or they only roar, that comes down more to experimenting with thumbnailing, storyboard, and animatic. Writing is great to have an overall structure structure of the story. So we have a character arc and we know where the character comes from and goes, but the individual humor that comes from making experience with puppets, making experience playing around the room with story team, making experience by acting stuff out. That's where the best comedy comes from. In terms of adult, some people think it's not necessary to write things which are too sophisticated or too aimed at adults. Of course, there are some things which wouldn't be streamed on a kids channel for violence or sexual content, etc., etc. That, of course, that would happen. But you can create a compelling story which touches both adults and kids simultaneously, even without dialogue. We realized that with Bad Dinosaur. I've been hearing from parents that even though the stories are simple, they can really empathize with the mother tyrannosaur. They can really empathize with the little kids sometimes, with the chicks that have their adventure. And I think that's the secret. That's the formula. Just make sure people empathize with those main characters. And that's why Bluey is so successful worldwide, because both kids and parents empathize with those characters. So there is not a structure or formula to make adult versus kids animation. I think the best thing to do is writing a product that both young and old can empathize with. Write characters that both young and adults can empathize with. That's everything you need to do or know if you want to write a successful story, I think.
I think that we sometimes have the impression that writing for children, there are all these rules in place. And to some degree, as you mentioned, you need to be careful about specific things. I remember at Annecy, I asked Joe Brum from Bluey how he structured the show. And he said, I see these as just 52 short films in 1 year, one per week. These are short films. That's it. We have a question that kind of touches to that. This is from Chloe. She says, how important it is for a preschool animation writer to know about education, especially how to teach young children. I think she's referring more to educational content. Have you got any experience where it's a show targeting, but also trying to teach them something?
Absolutely. I always try to get involved with shows which have got an educational side to it. Bad Dinosaur was an exception. Like, it's very flamboyant, burpy, funny kind of humor. It's over the top. But under that layer of potty jokes, there is a family and there is a bond and there is certain rules that you don't break. And I think that's what the writers and myself as a director took care of throughout the production. We made sure that those bonds got respected from between episodes, and those bonds evolved. Some characters don't change. They have more of a flat character arc throughout. Some characters just stay the same for the whole series and they change the world around them. But some key character like the mother, they change and they become more accepting and more confident and she lets her kids be more independent. And that's like a growing curve that we have injected into the series. But that's a specific thing for that one show, which was very much about fun and slapstick comedy. I do enjoy a lot handling educational content. I've done that for Sky Kids with a series called Obki, where we were teaching air and encouraging kids to be more respectful of the environment, of being more eco-friendly and so on. And it's always a balance between not being too preachy and trying not to impose solutions to kids. And it's always about giving information with fun anecdote. Like, we always tried on this Obki series, we always tried to create empathy through fun and humor. So you give a problem, you illustrate there is a problem on planet Earth. Through fun and through action, you can make that problem go away, or you can make that problem better, or you can make people aware of that problem. And that's something I'm doing right now as well here at the studio Jellyfish Pictures on this new series, Stan and Gran. It's also a very fun slapstick comedy story about a grandmother and a grandson who run around the UK coast looking for nature and creatures. But it's all about respecting and encouraging kids to enjoy the wildlife and respecting wildlife while having fun outside by the coast, in the woods, on the beach, and so on. I really like those products. I have to say, I have a bit of a background of activist myself. I worked for for Greenpeace in the past. Before moving to the UK, I was one of the annoying fundraiser who stop you on the street and say, hey, would you like to become a member of Greenpeace and help us save the panda and the seals up the Arctic? That was me. And I've always had this dream of injecting some of that activism into my animation work. So every time I get approached by a job which is educational, I'm really happy. And I think if you have that passion, if you have a passion such as activism, it can be anything, but if you have that passion, you will somehow find a way to inject that into your day-to-day job. Same for you as a writer, right? If you have a big passion, a topic which is close to your heart, that spills into your writing, that spills onto your stories. Is that right?
Absolutely. And even with when you're assigned some IP that maybe you're not a fan of or you're not familiar with, you can find what is your passion that can connect, what is your emotional connection to that particular story. I'd love to hear more about how you were able to create one of the best animation gems that we got to see with collecting different styles with Only a Child. And tell me a little bit about the inspiration behind that and also how to approach a narrative that is not 3x structure. It's poetic. It's more connected to something that's super powerful and emotional, like in this case, a speech.
Yeah, it was really a bit of out of my comfort zone because there is nothing to laugh about in Only a Child. There is no humor there. It was the first time I think I directed anything which had no gags or no jokes in it. And from that moment, I decided that's what I have to do. I have to make people laugh or I have to make people cry. There is no in between. As soon as I fall in the middle, the audience will leave the room or will leave the theater and walk away. You have to be on one side or the other, I think, if you want your film to be impactful and successful. And for Only a Child, it was a very unusual kind of project because the script and the concatenation of sequences and animated parts was entirely based on the speech that was given over 30 years ago in 1992 at the United Nations in Rio de Janeiro by Severn Kallis-Suzuki, a little 12 years old who addressed the politicians at this important conference to really try to convince them to make their action reflect their words and make their action impact what they were doing on planet Earth. Of course, she very much listened at that point, but I discovered this speech again around 2018, and I thought, wow, this needs to be adapted into an animated short. People need to hear this again. People forgot about this speech. People nowadays, they know about Greta, they know about young environmentalists who are marching around the world. That speech from 1992 is so contemporary and so timely. It needs to be listened to again. So I asked the permission to Severn. I cut the speech. If you hear the original speech, it hasn't got the same order. So I cut the speech just to make it in my head. It was flowing better with the visuals. I thought of imagery that could go well for each part. And for each imagery, I thought of a technique. So it was like, first there was text, then there was imagery in my storyboard, and then from there was a technique. According to the technique, I started contacting artists who are super good at what they do, stop motion animators, sand animators, paint on glass animators, people who do CGI destruction in CG softwares, 2D animators. So I try to create an army of artists, which is very diverse and with a variety of different techniques based on each sentence of the speech. So that was the key, the words, the imagery or the allegories, the metaphors, visual metaphors that were appearing in my head. And then I discussed each artist. There were over 25 different artists on Only a Child. I discussed that with each artist and we tried to find the best way to stay close to my initial vision, but I was also very open and accommodating if they had extra ideas or if they had new ideas. So some parts of Only a Child stayed very close to the initial animatic. Some parts became completely different depending on what the artist brought to the table.
Can you give me some example where the technique really informed your decision on how to approach the sequence at the animatic level?
For example, there is a particular part, I don't remember the exact words, but there is a particular part of the speech where Severance says that we are one of 9 billion, and there are so many other million of species around the world, and these all occupy planet Earth. So I needed an object which represented people, and so I thought of seeds. I thought of using actual seeds or beans to represent different population around the world. So that came, the technique was driven directly from what she was saying. We are billions of people on planet, and we are millions of species, and all that forms. So all those beans and seeds come onto the table while she's saying that. So that goes hand in hand, like technique and writing go hand in that case. It was very fascinating to find that. Another one was, for example, where the technique was very important was the crushing of the animals. There is a very touching part at the end with the porcelain animals, and when the thread gets cut and the rhino falls, I knew I wanted a lot of track. I knew I wanted a lot of dust particles and smashing on the ground, because it needed to be harsh. It needed to be in for the audience. So you have two choices, whether you build real porcelain animals or you get an expert in CG distractions. So I chose the second options. I approached a guy called Roman Kellin in Zurich, who is a incredibly skilled artist in Houdini with CGI distraction and simulations, and he took care of the whole sequence, making these beautiful animals fall down and work perfectly with that technique, with CGI, because of the content that needed to be, because of the visual and the imagery that needed to be shown. That wouldn't have been.
Hear about extinction and you see the thread almost breaking, and it's really good visual storytelling. And so I thought it was a great example, saying so much with a single picture.
And overall, yeah, it worked well as a first experience for just a content for more of an adult. It worked well. Surprisingly enough, though, that was not really my target audience, to be honest. My target audience was young adults and adults, I would say over 20 years old, who have been living change from the 90s up until now, and they've seen how the world has changed. That was my target audience. But surprisingly enough, Only a Child was screened in so many schools around the world. So it became really popular and really appreciated by kids as well. When I say kids, I mean from 7-year-old to 12. And some kids were really moved by it, and they came to me sometimes during screenings or at festival, and they thanked me. Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to say. And I felt so emotional. I felt like I got it all wrong. I made this film for slapping the hands of adults, like giving a moral slap to adults. But this film moved kids way more than adults. So sometimes you write something for a target audience and you realize, oh shit, I was wrong. These kids are appreciating it way more. And that's what happened with Only a Child. It was intended for over 20s, and under 20s appreciated it more.
That's beautiful.
Before we get to Simone's best tip, I wanted to invite you to join the Write for Animation Academy, a community where you'll connect with other passionate storytellers who are all about improving their craft. We write together, learn together, and help each other thrive in the animation industry. Today, we're celebrating the launch of Write Your Short, our online program where you get to write your short film script in 4 weeks. It's included in the Write for Animation Academy at no extra cost. So if you're looking to boost your animation career, join us today at writeforanimation.com/academy. The link is down below.
I wanted to ask you about the experience now working on a feature film as a storyteller.
So the experience on the feature film so far has been very positive. I'm working on 2 features, actually. One is a personal story, something that I came up with. And the second one is a feature film in collaboration with Timeless Films, the producer of Scrooge, which came out on Netflix 2 years ago. Now, I'm not writing the one with Timeless Films, but I got into the production. I got invited onto the project very early on when there was just an outline. So I've been working closely with the writer and giving feedback and suggestion to get the outline right, to get that bullet point outline stage right. And sometimes we notice it's worth spending a lot of time on the outline, make sure that works from a chronological and emotional point of view, instead of jumping onto the draft and writing 40 is better than
Absolutely.
me, of course. But
yes.
writing 50, 60 pages and then realizing, no, all the chronology is all wrong. The consecution, succession of events doesn't work and it's not that appealing and it's not that engaging. So what I'm learning from that script has been written now and it's looking very good. It's sounding really good and I'm happy with what we're doing. But what I learned from these experiences, it's worth spending more time at bullet point and outline rather than trying to polish a 100 pages script, which is such a beast to fight, such a difficult piece of puzzle to fight. So I would really encourage young writers to spend more time on a simple bullet points. If it works there on 3 pages, then it's very likely it's going to work on 120 pages.
That's why I also love to use cards and working with on the board and really figuring out the plot and the movie beforehand. I think that's very important.
Yeah, and how much the audience versus the characters know. That's the one thing which I find the trickiest. How much do you want the audience to know more of the character, or do you want the character to know more of the audience? That's a choice.
Yeah.
For each sequence of the movie, that's a choice. And sometimes it's good characters and audience to go hand in hand and they discover things together. Sometimes you want the audience to know less than the characters. So there is more suspense and they want to know more and they cannot stop watching. It's a very fine line and I'm learning more and more. Moving from the short form to long form, I'm appreciating more and more the art of writing and that balance between knowing and not knowing.
At what point did you start doing animatic? Are you already in the process? Did you wait until having the complete script approved? What's your take on that?
For a 90 minutes feature film, yes, you have to have that approved and you have to be in a position where everyone is happy. I have to be honest. These days in the industry, sometimes films go into animatic when the script is still not finished. It's really bad. And sometimes they rewrite 3 while the animators are animating. It's like all sorts of things can happen. But ideally, you don't want to go into production or pre-production until the script is locked. When it comes to differently from that, when it comes to slapstick, like more, as I said before, more humoristic comedy such as Bad Dinosaur, something a bit shorter and more and punchier, I think it's fine to get into animatic even if the script is rough, because you're going to be able to fill those gap with physical humor, body language, gags which are driven by locomotion and so on. So it really depends what kind of product you're writing.
Yeah, absolutely. The difference between storyboard-driven shows and script-driven. You can see that in TV more. This has been amazing. We'll keep talking about but hopefully we can do a part 2 because I love how you were able to inspire but also get into the details of how your process is.
Any last advice that you would like to share with our audience of storytellers?
That's something I tend to always tell students when I meet them is try to enter everything. That doesn't mean you have to become over competitive or you have to trying to win every competition. That's not the case, but enter everything. There are hundreds, thousands of open calls for scripts. There are thousands of festivals. There are pitching events where you can submit your script. Try as a young filmmaker who wants to write and direct, try to enter all these things or as much as possible. Try to submit your ideas to as many things as possible. If I didn't submit my ideas, whether intern in a studio or externally, I would have never become a director in London. Never. Love for storytelling, but also that passion for pitching and putting your idea out there that can make your career grow. So enter everything, or at least as much as possible.
Always apply. And sometimes it's like you get maybe some recruiters gonna hate me, but sometimes you don't fulfill all the things that the job position is asking for. But I tell them always apply anyway, because
a good studio will recognize an art like you, Simone. It's just incredible to see everything you've done so far, and I really look forward to the series and the feature films, and I hope we'll bring you back to share more in detail and dissect those stories as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Pietro. Thank you for having me.
Want to turn your story into a great film? It all starts with nailing your pitch. Watch this video for essential tips to avoid a pitching disaster. I'm screenwriter Pietro Schito, and this is Write for Animation, and I'll see you in the video.